All right, everyone, here is Creating a Government. So this is chapter 2 of your textbook. And here are the 5 sections from the textbook: early influences, independence, the first national government, the Constitutional Convention, and ratifying the Constitution. So here we go. Here's our objectives for section 1, the things that you should know when we are done. Section 1. Early political ideas. So the political ideals of English colonists, these are people who came over to America from England. So they're going to bring over some of their ideas with them. Some of those ideas were limited government, because back in the day in England, the king or queen did not have absolute power. By the time people had started coming to the United States, the king had very limited power. And they had a representative government in England. It's called Parliament. And so the idea of having a limited leader and a group of people to represent you in Congress was already a thing in England. It wasn't something new to us. So some documents that had limited the power of kings were the Magna Carta, which is the first one. Then the Petition of Right, and then the English Bill of Rights. So all of these documents are going to help us to form our government. Now, in the early colonial government, we're talking about the colonies. So before states were states, they were colonies. So in the different colonies, most local governments had a limited government. So not all power resided in one place. The governor of each colony served as the chief executive for that government. Governors were appointed or elected, which is very similar to England. It can be either or. Assemblies of elected representatives existed in most colonies. These people would help to make rules and laws and punishments for breaking those rules and laws. And then assemblies and councils served to limit the government's power. So congratulations, you're done with section 1. We are now moving on to section 2. This is independence. This is when America decides that Britain is too controlling and we kind of want to break away from them. So we'll talk about the policies that caused that to happen, the ideas that influenced the Declaration of Independence, and how the governments of the new states were similar. So British policies that really made us angry were trade regulations, and this is actually bigger than the taxes issue. Trade regulations said that the United States had to trade with Britain and Britain only. It wasn't Britain first or Britain and some other people. It was just straight up Britain. And that made the colonists very angry, because when you can trade with multiple partners, you can trade with the one who will pay you the most money. When you can only trade with one partner, that trading partner actually sets the price and you end up getting jacked. And then the other one, taxes such as the Stamp Act. You had to have a stamp on your paper goods saying that you had paid the tax. And that really made us angry, and so we threw a bunch of tea in the harbor and had the world's largest cup of tea. We call it the Boston Tea Party. Perhaps you've heard of it. The ideas that we really liked, we stole from some guys named Locke and Hobbes, which you've already heard about. Those ideas are unalienable rights of human beings, like life, liberty, and property, protection of citizens' natural rights, the social contract states that the government exists to protect us and our natural rights. The government is ruled by the consent of the people, and it's there to safeguard the public good. Remember, to do what's best for the greatest number of people. So once we get our independence, we surprisingly whoop the British, and they run away to England for a few years. They're going to come back and try to take over America in 1812. It's not going to quite work out for them, and after that, we became best buddies. So some of our similarities among governments: limited government in each state. Each state's going to hold annual elections. Many governments are going to have bicameral legislatures, which means two houses. Bicameral, two houses. So two house legislatures. Those legislatures will be made up of representatives, so people that we elect to go and make laws for us, and limited gubernatorial power. Such a goober of a word, but what it really means is the governor's power is limited. Protection of individual rights is super important, and there are gender and race restrictions on voting, so it's not like everyone has the right to vote. Really, at this time, it was basically white property-owning males. Now, our first national government, this is what was created after we won, or just before we won the War for Independence. And so, I believe we call that the American Revolution. So we knew we were going to win, so we needed a government to help guide us after and during, really, the revolution. So the powers given to the government, the national government, under the Articles of Confederation, were to declare war, to conduct foreign policy, to borrow money, to settle disputes between states, and to manage relations between American Indians. Now, some of you out there might be thinking right now, well, Mr. Nunn, that sounds like a bunch of war-related duties. Yes, absolutely. We created the Articles of Confederation just so we could make allies and settle our own affairs. However, there were no officials to carry out Congress's laws, so Congress could make all of the laws they want. There would be no one to carry them out and enforce them. Congress itself didn't have the authority to carry out their laws, so if a state didn't like the law of Congress, they would just ignore it, and Congress couldn't do anything about it. They also had no power to tax, so we could go to war, but we couldn't tax to pay for that war. There was no national currency. Each state had its own currency. Try paying for a war with using states' currencies. No power to regulate foreign trade or domestic trade, no national court system, and amendments are easily blocked by one state. So if they wanted to make any change to the Articles of Confederation, one state could disagree with the change, and all other 12 states would be out of luck. Now, we would never be unanimous on changing any rules because there are so many differences between each state. And those differences range from cultural to economic to geographic differences. And back in the day, geography was a huge deal. You couldn't just hop on a plane and go from one place to another. At best, you had a wagon that you could travel in. Lots of people, though, ended up walking. So it wasn't really easy to get around, so most people did not go too far from where they were born. So we get to the Constitutional Convention. We've won the war, and we're like, hey, let's make it easier to govern, give our national government a little bit more power. So people go over to the Constitutional Convention. Some very, very important people. And it didn't start out as the Constitutional Convention. It actually started out as a convention to improve the Articles of Confederation. So some people that showed up, 8 of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence were there. This was a document that told England, hey, we're not a part of you anymore. And it had been done 6 years earlier. 7 people participated in the First Continental Congress, 7 people who had been state governors. George Washington was there, Ben Franklin was there, Alexander Hamilton was there, James Madison was there. So there were a lot of really, really famous people there. There were 2 different plans proposed at the Constitutional Convention. So when it was found out that the Articles of Confederation definitely would not work, people started coming up with brand new ideas. The two ideas that got the most support were the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. Now, back in the day, Virginia was one of the largest states in the Union, and so they wanted a strong national government with a bicameral legislature, which means a two-house legislature, both houses based on each state's population, and an executive and judiciary branch both chosen by the legislature. Now, smaller states had a big problem with this because this gave all of the power to large states. So the large states would control the legislature, which then chose the executive branch, which then chose the judiciary branch. And so small states were like, why are we even here? This isn't even giving us any chance to be a part of this government. So the competing plan, the small states plan, was the New Jersey plan. Back in the day, New Jersey was not the most population dense state in the government or in the country. They were a tiny little state with very few people. And so they wanted a national government with a unicameral legislature, which is a one-house legislature, in which the states had a stronger role. From this plan, we get the idea of having our Senate, where it's 2 people per state. So after hours and 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 hours of debate, we came up with a great compromise. Yes, boys and girls, back in the day, politicians would compromise on things. So the Great Compromise, which was a fantastic thing for us, created a bicameral legislature. So once again, 2-house legislature. Representation in the House of Representatives is based on population and elected directly by the people. So California has the most representatives to the House of Representatives. We have 53. Each state, no matter how big they are, has 2 state representatives in the Senate. And majority votes by both the House and the Senate are needed to pass laws. So when a bill is passed in one house, it then goes to the other house to be voted on. And that is where we will stop for today. Good job.